by telling you about the other day when I got my 5-year-old from kindergarten. So we walked home, and actually we were having a pretty nice talk. So he asked me a couple of things about planets because that's one of his newest obsessions. And we talked back and forth. We asked a lot of questions. And I managed to answer a few of them. But when it got to the details, in terms of what are the differences between stars and planets, and when we are talking about different galaxies, to be honest, I was at the end of my expertise. So I was openly admitting to him, well, actually I'm not quite sure, so maybe I'll have to look that up, and then I can get back to you. And then he was just saying to me, well, we can just ask Alexa when we come home. So that was basically his his approach to getting this answer. And I was actually, that was so nice for me to hear on the one hand, because I think it's so great for this generation to just live with AI-based devices, and to just experience these devices to be totally normal and to actually help us in living our daily lives. But at the same time, it reminded me about so many conversations that I had with my parents, who are, I would say, part of the baby boomer generation. Relatives, also friends like in my age, a little bit older maybe, or even a little bit younger, and or my grandma, who is actually 85. So a range of ages, I would say. But I was having so many conversations with these people at other occasions about AI-based applications, and for example, Alexa. And many of them were very skeptic and they said, I would never do this, I would never use this. I was, in general, and even talking about the use of AI in other domains, also in domains as sensitive as in medical contexts, there was even more skepticism. So I was, just intrigued by learning that there are so many differences in terms of how AI is perceived. And this is exactly what we will be talking about today. So you would actually think that it is as simple as that, right? So we have an AI-based solution or something based on technology that is powered by artificial intelligence, and then we have a customer that adopts this solution, that uses this device, that uses this product, this service, and actually it is as simple as that. But the thing is that we really have to understand how or why this customer at the other hand, on the right hand side, when does he or she adopt the solution? So what are actually factors influencing the decision whether or not to adopt AI-based solutions, especially by startups? Since startups actually, having a great idea, having a great product or service, but at the same time being a new company, by definition, a company that is not a well-known brand, right? That is innovative, there are no prior experiences that people could have made with your company, no prior contact. So usually startups, this is one of the reasons why startups, why it's hard for startups to actually gain traction in the market, especially when they are launching very innovative ideas that are based on AI. So as Sherwin Kodabande from Boston Consulting Group framed it, it's not about the technology behind AI or the algorithms. That's not the main driver of value from AI, but it is the human in the equation. And that's exactly also where psychology comes into play, right? Because it's actually all of this is psychology. And I would love to talk to you today, or to dive a little bit deeper and explore the world of factors that actually determine whether your AI-based product, AI-based service can be successfully launched to the market and actually will be adopted by customers? Or what are factors that might basically be barriers for adoption? So let's start right with the first one, which is the first pitfall that startups can engage in, or that actually startups should avoid, which is not thinking customer-centric. Well, this is actually pretty intuitive, right? So coming back to this very simple picture from the beginning, we are always looking at individuals that adopt or use, right, or not use our solution, our AI-based solution. The thing is, these individuals can be like private persons, like you and me. It can also be employees, actually. So persons in companies, in large companies and small companies. Maybe they are not the only decision maker whether or not to adopt or use a certain AI-based solution. But they are, of course, there is always something that this individual brings with him or her that will influence the decision whether or not to use a certain AI-based solution. So let's have a closer look at those different factors that are inherent in this individual that should actually take into account when, gaining a better understanding of why or why not this individual might be open to use our AI-based solution. So first of all, demographics play a role here, right? So we just talked about age, for example, but also gender. So when we talk about age, there is this this natural, divide in society right now, which marks digital immigrants. So people that have not grown up with digital technologies, and digital natives. So people that actually grew up with those technologies, like my son does right now, right? And they by nature have a very different stance on digital technologies in general and AI in particular. So we should keep this in mind. But it does not mean that digital natives are always more open to innovation or to AI-based solutions, since, as I already mentioned, and you might also know one or two of those, the same age as you, maybe even younger, but still very skeptic and hesitant to adopt AI-based solutions. So we can talk about gender, age, when we talk about demographics, but also education matters here, and stuff like income, right? So who is actually capable in using those solutions and having an Alexa at home? And I mean, Alexa is just one example, right? So this is one of the factors that is definitely influencing the individual. Then we have innovativeness. So what do I mean when I say innovativeness? So actually, there's a consumer inherent trait or tendency called consumer innovativeness, saying that, well, there are some people that are more open to innovations, to new digital technologies, to AI than others are, right? And this is, I mean, there's a correlation with age, but it can also be very independent from that. Then we should also look at the lifestyle. So are those people having or living a more traditional lifestyle and, adhering to more conservative values and norms, or are they rather, living a very progressive lifestyle and a modern lifestyle and looking actually for new technologies to enhance their lives? And then we have digital autonomy. So this, of course, also comes with the level of expertise that you have with digital media and technology, but also with your own preference. Like, do you actually like being able to autonomously carry out certain tasks, maybe by with the help of AI, rather than other people? So think about, I mean, starting with self-service technologies, right? Like the check-in at the airport, which is something that has slowly been substituted. So you have actually always done that with employees, with real people, but now you do it on your own. So, but there are people that like that think it's great that you don't have a single contact point with a person until you're actually at the safety check, right? But there are also other people that really don't like that and that need systems, right? Or they want it, or maybe they are also used to it, and now they are kind of afraid that they are losing something. And this is also going hand in hand with digital literacy and AI literacy. So how is the level of experience that people have with digital technologies in general, or with AI-based solutions in particular? And like, what do they know about that? What are their skills? Did they actually engage in some interactions with AI, for example? Or are they just, hesitant to do that? So all of this is, those are, and this list is not exhaustive, right? But this is just a glance, at the inside of an individual that you might be talking to when you want to market or your AI-based product or service. And as I said, this can also be another person, that is working at an institution, depending on whether you are in B2B or B2C, right, or B2B2C. So there are always stakeholders that you have to keep in mind, but all of those in the end are individuals. But of course, not only the individual is something that we should care about, we should also avoid the second pitfall as a startup, which is underestimating the social system. Okay, what does that mean? Well, actually, of course, the individual is not isolated, but there are also other factors that influence what the individual thinks, how it acts, and if it actually, whether it in the end actually uses our AI-based product or service. So we have a social system that we have to take into account as well. But what are factors characterizing social systems? There are different levels in different social systems in terms of the societal acceptance of AI-based solutions. So there are some societies and some countries that are more open to that, or even just more making more progress with regard to that in comparison to other countries. And this, of course, also reflects in the social network that this individual is, embedded in. So are there friends and family or colleagues, other companies that are using the same type or similar types of AI-based solutions or not? So this plays a role here as well. And then, of course, there are also ethical considerations in the social system playing a role, right? Like values and norms. Are there standards by the industry that are actually set? And I mean, there are huge discussions right now going on about responsible AI. The EU Act is actually, taking form, and all of those are rules and standards that are set that kind of are part of the social system and are like a signal to individuals in terms of what is safe, what is not safe, what is trustworthy, what is not trustworthy, and all of those factors influence the decisions that these individuals make. Then, of course, we also have countries or societies that are very tech or anxious, basically, that are rather, as I said, basically on this individual level. We also had this adherence to traditional norms and values, or more modern norms and values. And you can basically also transfer this on a society level, right? So there are more traditional countries and societies and more progressive modern societies. And this, of course, translates also into digital maturity, right? So how mature in terms of digital technologies is the country or the social system that we are, engaging in as a startup? And especially with regard to artificial intelligence, or the maturity of artificial intelligence. And there might be, if you think about the industrialized nations, of course, we usually have a very, or we are digitally pretty mature. We have a nice infrastructure in place, but I mean, even here, there's room for improvement, right? But when you think about other countries, there might even be hurdles in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the, basically rendering a functioning infrastructure for those solutions to be safe, to be carried out safely, which all of those are playing a role for individuals. And maybe regarding, more traditional or more modern countries, think about the US and their, mindset with regard to technologies, digital technologies and AI versus, well, maybe in particular Germany, right? I mean, there's a pretty different mindset, and people are just shaped by that, even if they are, innovators and early adopters, still we are socialized in a certain social system, and we cannot we cannot isolate ourselves from that. So this is the second pitfall that startups should avoid, to kind of underestimate the social system. So what's the third pitfall that we should avoid as startups? And I know if you're a startup, usually those ideas and the products and services based on AI are pretty awesome. So I'm a fan. I mean, I'm an enthusiast. You don't have to, you don't have to convince me about your product or service. But at the same time, I hope you are enthusiastic about your products and services. But you should be very careful in terms of overestimating your product. So you should not overestimate your product, even if it's a great product or service. The characteristics of your AI solution, your AI-based product or service, of course, also sending out signals to individuals in terms of if it's being safe or trustworthy, which at the end, of course, influences whether they will actually use it. So let's have a closer look at those characteristics of your products or services. So of course, we're talking about something like ease of use, right? So do you actually engage in customer-centric user experiences and user experience design? Should be one of the most important aspects when thinking about so how do customers, or whether be B2B or B2C, how do they use your product? Is it understandable, right? Is it easy to use? But we're also talking about behavioral control. So how much control does the individual have when using your solution? And because people usually are they like to use something that enhances their self-efficacy, right? So they want to kind of feel like I achieved something with the help of this AI-based solution. So I'm still in control, but I'm in control, but my actions are enhanced, right? So actually be an enabler of autonomy, right? And help people in doing that. And of course, this is all interlinked with other factors that are listed here. Thinking about performance, of course, your product, your service should be performing reliably, right? You should, have a product where people feel safe using it, and that people can trust. And this actually, I would like to give you a little insight into research in terms of medical AI use. So research so far found that people are very resistant to use AI-based solutions in medical context, since they think, like they have the feeling that their uniqueness is neglected by those AI-based solutions. So comparing a doctor, like a human doctor, with an AI-based solution, they think like, my uniqueness is not really reflected, or it cannot be adhered to as much as the doctor can actually do that. But on the other hand, they actually oversee that AI-based solutions render much more accurate diagnoses, for example. So we have the benefits, and that's also why it's so difficult, right? Even if your product is beneficial, if it's for people that are not skeptic, they actually see, okay, it's perfect, why don't we do that? But you have to convince people that rather see the flaws than the benefits of the solution, right? And knowing which factors might contribute, and for example, assuring people that their uniqueness is not neglected, but maybe on the other hand, even, right, is taken care of by certain aspects, then this might be helpful for people to kind of, be or feel more safe in terms of accepting your solution. Then, of course, when we talk about AI and technology, we always talk about complexity, usually. So people that are not techies might actually, feel insecure because they do not understand what's happening. And here, something like explainable AI comes into play, right? Sometimes you have to engage in customer education to a certain extent. Of course, you don't have to, make customers AI experts, but to just give them a feeling of what is happening with for example, with data, with their data, or how is the AI-based solution actually deciding, or like how is the system, functioning, how is it running, to basically give them a feeling for that, and to reduce this perceived complexity. And then, of course, novelty. We usually, right now, we are dealing with novel solutions when we talk about AI, especially for a lot of individuals. An innovation is, per definition, something that is perceived as new by an individual. And this, of course, can vary. When you have a lot of experience with AI, you might not think that a lot of AI-based solutions are innovative, but if you don't have a lot of experience, not a lot of knowledge, right, then all of this is like a huge innovative bubble for you. And of course, you also have to take this into account, because there are so many psychological biases that people not even are aware of, right? For example, there's something called the status quo bias, meaning that people like to, stay where they are and use what they are using, and they actually don't like to change anything. So usually you kind of have to convince people to change something in terms of their behavior, in terms of what they're used to, right? So taking this into account when marketing your AI-based solution might be very helpful, because you can focus more on the benefits, but also communicate, yes, there's change involved, but change for the better, right? So what is actually easier in your life, for example, when you adopt this AI-based solution, kind of helping people to let go of the old. Basically, you kind of have to really help people do that. At the same time, you have to keep in mind, and it's very individual, of course, based on your AI-based solution, what is the kind of behavior change that's involved, right? So how much is the change, and is it difficult for people to change their behavior, or is it actually, like, how can you make this easier for people? You should also think about the compatibility. So for some people, it might be very incompatible to use this AI-based solution in their daily lives. For some, it might be very helpful and very compatible. So you kind of have to work on making it work in their lives, right? In the individual's lives. And of course, we're talking about benefits. Usually, AI-based solutions and products and services bring a lot of benefits. That's their strength. But you should kind of make sure that you show those benefits, not only talk about them, but really make them tangible, right? Really make them, make people understand what are use cases, what's the usefulness involved with these AI-based solutions, what's the advantage that it actually brings, right? And talking about trialability, like observability, how observable are those? Is your product or your service when people are using it? It might be difficult if your product is not seen, and a lot of AI-based solutions are not seen, right? Because they are working in the background. Basically, they are enhancing some processes. So you kind of have to make sure to either communicate it, like what is happening and where is it happening, because of course, if something is observable, it will also get more accepted and people will get more used to it, right? So there should be a transparency about that. And if people can try something like trialability, that will also help them in terms of gaining trust and reducing uncertainty. So trials are always a good thing if this is something that is, that is feasible for your products or services. This can be something that you should think of in terms of, maybe how that people can kind of experience your AI-based solutions before really committing to it. Right, and then of course at the end there are also threats. So this is especially this is a huge point for people that are skeptic, right? They rather see the threats than the benefits. So they think about, okay, that's maybe a neat thing, but what could happen? What could change? What could I lose actually when I use this kind of AI-based solution? And you have to kind of help people understand, like, what are actual threats, but what are maybe only fears of the people that are not really threats at all. Like one of the common threats or that people are afraid of is that AI will substitute workforce, for example. not understanding that basically an enhancement with AI will make so many processes more efficient and will actually give, for example, in the medical context, maybe to stick to that example, will give actual doctors and nurses more time for their patients, right? So it is a good thing. It's not more getting more impersonal, but it's actually getting more personal when you use AI, right? So yeah, but this is something that people really have to that you have to explain to people. And then you see that all of those things, characterizing your AI-based product or service, they are expected by people. So they have a certain, picture in their minds about your product or service. But then in the end, it's also perceived, right? If people have used it, then they will actually reevaluate, is it really easy to use, is it complex, is it novel, and so on and so forth. So this is something that is dynamic. It's not a static thing, right? It's also changing. So this is something where you can also, of course, as a startup, work with and communicate. The better you understand the individuals and the certain barriers or fears, the better you can help people by communicating the right stuff, basically. Right. So this was a huge point here, UI-based solutions. But of course, that's what we are. Yeah, that's the heart of all of this, right? The AI-based solutions. So let's get to the next pitfall. You should, as a startup, marketing your AI-based service or product, you should not intermingle different trust dimensions. Yes, there are different dimensions to trust. And yes, trust is, of course, the deal breaker or deal maker. So you want people to trust your AI-based solutions, right? So people will not use it if they don't trust it. But there are different dimensions to trust. So we have cognitive trust, which is actually, based on performance, on reliability. So how good is something performing? So is the medical diagnosis accurate or not? Is it better than a doctor or not, right? So this is something that's pretty rational. But then we also have affective trust. And this is actually a huge deal when it comes to how trust is formed. So only having cognitive trust does not help you to actually gain or to get this translated into behavior. You also have to gain affective trust, and affective trust is rather based on feelings. It's based on experiences and emotions, and the relatedness to a certain person or entity. And this is something that is a challenge for startups because, as I said before, you're not a well-known company. So you, as a startup or startups itself, themselves are not or they have to work hard to build some kind of first trust impression, right? Because we are always talking about a first impression here, because people usually don't have prior experience with your startup or with your AI-based product or service. So this is something where also communication comes into play, where design of your product or service comes into play. And actually, I've done a lot of research exactly on that. And it's really, amazing to see how affective trust really is playing a major role here. Not only cognitive, of course, also cognitive. So we also want something to, be reliable and to really perform good. But that's not all, right? So people are still emotional beings or human beings that are looking for some kind of connectedness. So you should not intermingle that there are those two dimensions, and different communications or different measures can actually enhance cognitive trust or affective trust in different ways. So the next thing that you should keep in mind is that there is actually a gap between intention and the behavior, right? So you all might be aware that people form intentions for a certain behavior. So I'm thinking, okay, tomorrow I will work out. That's my intention. Well, if I actually work out, that's actually, that's another story, right? So there's and that's the same also for so many other behaviors that people are forming. And the thing is, why is this important for you, for startups in general that want to bring their AI-based solutions to the market successfully? because you should take this into account, because at some point you might engage in some kind of, market research, and kind of, you want to know your customer better. You will maybe ask them some questions, you will have some interviews, or you will have a survey to kind of get a feeling of, is this what we are designing right now cool or not, or do we actually want to add another feature, just to kind of helping you in your design or development process. But all of that, what you're doing usually here is measuring intentions. So if you measure, for example, are people willing to recommend, or are people willing to use, or, all of this are intentions, and this does not necessarily mean that there will also be the behavior. So I have heard so many stories, unfortunately, where startups have engaged in extensive market research and they had very good prognosis, and then they launched and the product was just not taking off, because actually the behavior was not like they actually forecasted, but they rather measured the intentions and did not come to the real behavior. So here you really have to find ways in terms of, depends on the solution or the product or service that you're offering, but you have to find creative ways to really go beyond only intentions and really to behavior, to not fall into, or make this mistake in terms of translating intentions into behavior one to one. And this brings us to the sixth factor, actually, which is that you should not disregard user feedback. As startups, I think almost every startup knows how important user feedback is, because this is what you live for, right? This is what you need to kind of improve your product and services. But here again, it's not the end. Like when people use your product, that's not the end. Then actually the whole circle starts again, right? So you should always have a feedback loop in place. And I know that a lot of startups, or a lot of successful startups, put a huge emphasis on very personal and high quality customer service. So meaning that actually they talk to their customers, they never lose the touch or the grip with their customers in terms of understanding what they actually need, where are challenges, what can they improve, right? And when we talk about minimum viable product approach, of course, this is this is one of the most important parts to it, to include customer feedback and build or improve your minimum viable product. In terms of AI-based solutions, I think this is even more important, but rather in terms of perceptions, like what do people perceive? Where are difficulties actually that they encounter when they use the products or services? Where can you improve your communication, right? What should you maybe explain better? So it's not always about your product or your service itself, but rather how it is perceived. So it's always like everything that we're talking about right now is how people perceive it. So you might have a very clear picture of everything in your mind, but the thing is that you kind of have to translate this and kind of show this to the people that at the end will actually use your solution. So you should not forget about this last step. And this basically, those are the 6 psychological factors that can actually determine whether your AI startup will be successful or not. So you should never, forget that, and basically think customer-centric. Keep in mind that there's a social system that is influencing individuals when making that decision. Keep in mind that your product is, of course, also a huge influential factor, and that there are a lot of characteristics and little levers that you can basically use, and that you have to be aware of and communicate in the right way to help people understand, to help people to use your product or service. Understand that there are different dimensions of trust, and kind of based on your individual solution, find out how you can enhance and increase not only cognitive, but also affective trust. Then think about ways how you can, basically adhere to or account for this intention behavior gap. So how can you make your prognosis, your estimates more accurate? How can you actually learn more about people's actual behavior, not only the intentions? And at the end, of course, always listen to your customer, even if they have used your product, if they are using your products. Those are the most valuable customers, because they can give you feedback, they can help you to make it more understandable, more trustworthy, and this will then in the end help you to gain new customers, to gain more customers, which is basically what every startup has to do, right? So we always want to have our takeoff at some point, and this just means that we need a certain mass of people adopting, a certain mass of people trusting, right? And be it in a B2B setting, like being it companies that use your product or service, or individuals in the end. Yeah, that's basically always the same mechanism in place here. Right, and this brings me to the end. I'm happy that I could actually share my those 6 psychological factors, and I'm happy to talk more and answer some questions.